So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar. My name's Dal Gemmell, and I'm responsible for the console. And along with me presenting today is Travis Teague, and Travis is focused on building our developer community. So we will be recording the session. We will upload it and add to our collection on the Helium YouTube channel. So this recording and the past ones that we've done, and also future ones, that's the best place to find these. For Q&A, we have a time reserved at the end for your questions and answers, and feel free to either use the chat or just ask us over the phone as well. Here are the things that we want to cover. So why Helium? Just kind of level set, talk about what are those key things about Helium that we think are really important and help developers. We're going to talk about the latest feature and have some live demos. But prior to that, we're going to talk about labels. Labels are a feature in console and really critical to effectively use console to manage devices, organize devices, use integrations, and also leverage this latest feature that we're going to talk about. In addition to that, we'll have some marketing updates that we'll share. And as I mentioned, the Q&A portion after that. All right, so, prior to Helium, if you wanted to connect devices, it was very difficult. There was a lot of network fragmentation out there, and it seemed like there was a trade-off between either cost or complexity. So if you want to build a private network or you just want to start collecting devices, you would now need to get into the network infrastructure business and start deploying a bunch of gateways and have to worry about connecting these devices when really you want to focus on the application. Or it was very costly, and it was just prohibitive for you to start down that path. We started out with this new type of network that is now the largest public LPWAN network in the US. We only started shipping our hotspots nationwide actually mid-October. We started selling earlier, but nationwide shipping was only in mid-October, and we've already been able to create this huge network. This is really tied to the approach that we've gone about to build this network. It's not the Helium network. We're not out there trying to deploy a bunch of hotspots. We have actually created a incentivization mechanism where we are rewarding people for deploying hotspots, providing this coverage, and it seems to be working quite well. In terms of range, it's a big question that we get. There's very long range. We say 200 times the range of Wi-Fi, but in some cases, in certain environments, that could be even a lot more. And in terms of cost, we get a lot of comparisons to cellular. We're a fraction of the cost of cellular. There is no need also to buy SIM cards. And just to give you an idea, if you have a device that's transmitting every 5 minutes for 365 days of the year, at the end of that year, you'll only pay a little over $1. So this is quite different than anything that exists out there. And in addition to that, one of the issues with using something like cellular is battery drain. And if you're using a sensor, you want to leave it in the field for a long period of time, you don't want to have to worry about having to go out and swap out batteries. All the core technology for Helium, like the blockchain, is open source. As I mentioned, this is a decentralized network, so it's not owned, like Helium does not own the network. It's owned by those independent network operators who have decided to participate in building this with us. And there's no proprietary hardware to use the network from Helium's perspective. It's all commodity. You can use whatever off-the-shelf sensors you want, as long as they're LoRaWAN compatible. And in addition to that, in the not so distant future, you will also be able to leverage existing LoRaWAN gateways and add them to the network to help grow the network. That is coming soon, so stay tuned. But at the end of the day, we want our developers to exercise their creativity, their innovation, focus on their applications, and not have to worry about building networks. So the Helium console, if you take a step back and you say, well, what is the competitive advantage for Helium versus other networks? If you really want to simplify it, it really comes down to two things. One is coverage that we talked about. We're seeing great demand. We've already sold out of our original batch, and our new batch is about to start shipping in May. Basically, we were kind of overwhelmed by the demand of people wanting to participate in this new network. And so coverage, we are seeing a lot of growth, but also on the tools and the resources that people need in order to take advantage of that coverage, or as we say, like harness the network. So Helium Console is one of our main tools that developers will use to harness the network. And it's available to anyone. There's no cost. You sign up, it's free, there's no credit card, and you can just go to helium.com and look for console and start adding devices. So labels, as I mentioned, labels are critical to console if you want to use it effectively. You can kind of think of labels as like the super glue that binds everything together in consoles. So if you're looking to organize and manage devices, you need to use labels. You also need them to connect devices to integrations. So sending that data from devices to your endpoints via whatever integration you want to set up, whether it's HTTP, MQTT, or some of the other more famous endpoints like My Devices or AWS. In addition to that, the new feature, functions, which Travis will demo, you need labels to apply those functions to devices to make it work. So when we're looking at building console, we thought, okay, we need to think obviously about the audience. And the issue is that the audience can range from somebody who is more of a hobbyist or a small business. Maybe they're trying to do something like build smart chicken coops, all the way up to, say, industrial companies, Fortune 500 companies that have thousands and thousands of devices that they want to manage. And so we wanted to create a system that was scalable, that could go from dozens of devices all the way up to thousands of devices, but also make it very flexible and intuitive, so it wouldn't be intimidating for somebody to get started in using it right away. So in terms of flexibility with labels, you can have a single label and apply it to many devices. So I want a temperature sensor, or I have a number of temperature sensors and I want to apply this label because it's important to me to know what type of sensor it is. You can also have many labels to one device. So in addition to temperature sensor, I also have the type of structure that this sensor is in a warehouse. And I have the location of where it is in San Francisco. And any of these sensors any of these labels obviously can be swapped. So if it goes from San Francisco to New York, now I can use a different New York label. Or if it goes from a warehouse to a processing plant, I could switch that out as well. And so you've got one to many, you've got many to one. And in addition to that, you also have many to many. So, we really wanted to make it flexible because, again, going to the audience, there's many different ways that, and very different ways that somebody who is a hobbyist or kind of a single developer would use this system versus a company that has teams and many people under them, all organizing across many different locations. So next, integrations. Obviously, integrations are super important. At the end of the day, the data that you're collecting from these devices needs to go into a data center, an endpoint, wherever you're going to have that data so that you can analyze it and make decisions based on that data. So just a quick plug about integrations. In console, we have two types of integrations, some that are pre-built and some that are custom. So pre-built, like My Devices or AWS, you can very quickly start sending data to those endpoints. And then we have more flexible type of integrations like HTTP or MQTT, where you can define where you want to send that data. Now, with integrations, it's necessary to have a label in order for a device to connect and send data to that integration. So there's, like we mentioned, AWS or My Devices. If you had an integration as part of that process, you would also create a label, ideally very representative of that integration. So AWS IoT, and similar for My Devices. Now, because we want to make it intuitive and minimize confusion, we've also included an icon. So if you look to the left, there's looks like a little plug. That is to represent that this label is tied to an integration. So similarly, you could have a single label tied to integration, like a one-to-one, or you could have multiple labels. So, like for example, you could have Google Cloud, and then also, if you wanted to, you could have a location. I just wanted to show in the middle there this prototype and production scenario, just very quickly, just one use case and kind of the power of combining labels with integration. So if I've got a production environment and I'm sending all my data to AWS, and that's my production environment, I want to make sure that everything's working correctly before I add any devices to that and send data. So what I could have is, I have this prototype device, and I could label it prototype if I wanted to or not. And what I want to do is I just want to quickly send data to, say, My Devices and validate that, the sensor is sending data all the way up through hotspots, the Helium Network, through console, and then to My Devices. And this My Device is a very rapid way to, and very straightforward in order to add devices, and so you could quickly see and confirm that your device was actually working correctly and sending data as expected. Now, once you have completed that, then it's just a simple procedure to swap out the label, and that prototype now becomes part of production, and you just swap out My Devices with the AWS. And just another use case, if you wanted to, you could have a device that was sending data to multiple integrations. You would just have multiple labels, but you can definitely do that. So functions, so Travis is going to talk more about functions. This is a new feature that we are very quickly adding to console. So functions, the first function that we're actually going to be adding is going to be used to decode payloads. And functions, in terms of functions and the label relationship, is very similar to integrations in that you need to use labels to attach functions to devices. you can attach multiple labels to a function, um, or a single label, depending on your preference. Uh, it's it's not so obvious, because the designer wanted to make these slides look really nice, but there is also a visual differentiation between a label that is tied to a function. It will be like a solid color, um, as opposed to kind of a light background color. So that, again, we try to use visual cues to make it clear what type of um, capabilities these labels were attached to. One of the things that just wanted to highlight, that you can't have the same label attached to two different functions. So if you think of them as, right now, the only function that we have in console are decoders. So if you have decoder 1 and decoder 2, and they're applying different scripts to decode whatever payload, the system wouldn't know which script to apply if you're using the same label on a device. So we've factored that into the design, and then if you do try to do that, you will just have to choose one or the other. And likely you will use functions with integrations, but there's also scenarios where you can use functions without it. And like, for example, if you just want to do some quick troubleshooting and ensure that the payloads that are being sent out from devices are correct, you can do that with, actually, in connection with another feature that we recently deployed, which is called debug mode. So just a quick summary. Some recommendations. So make sure that you're defining labels clearly for the purpose that they're using. So if you're using them for integration, in the naming might be useful to say integration or function. Be consistent with your labels. Just kind of good housekeeping stuff, like if you were structuring stuff and using folders on a desktop, right? You want to make sure that it is very clear and you're consistent with your naming schemes. There is a label index page, so that is probably the best place to go and manage labels, update them, delete them if needed, um, apply devices to labels once you access that label page. I talked about the visual cues that we have provided to help differentiate labels that are attached to these different capabilities. And just a reminder, labels are necessary to send data via integrations and to decode data via functions. And so with that, I think that's enough of the tell portion. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Travis. And Travis is going to actually show some stuff.
Hey, folks. Thanks, Dal. Thanks for the introduction.
Okay, so let me stop sharing. Okay, Travis, all yours.
All right, let's see here. Can everyone see my screen now? Hopefully. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, Travis, we can see it. Looks good. Thanks.
All right, so functions. This is just ridiculously cool. It's something I'm very excited about that we're finally supporting. And so what this allows us to do, let me get this window thing out of the way, maybe. Okay, so what we can do, we can create new functions that allow us to decode payloads that are coming through the system, right? And so we can go ahead and just name a guy, say, okay, the function type, we're gonna have a decoder, right? And for format, we're gonna say, now I'm gonna pause here for just a moment. You were going to notice this drop-down list growing much longer in the following weeks. What this allows us to do is bring a decoder that we know is good and solid for a device into the system where you don't really have to mess with things, right? But we're going to look at custom scripts right now. And this is just in JavaScript, and it allows me to have my input and then what port we're going to operate. And what I mean by port is sometimes with sensors, I will run GPS on a particular port number. I will run maybe a temperature sensor on a particular port number. And then I can stagger those across time. And so I'm not necessarily just having a huge payload that's being uploaded all at once. You know, I can say, okay, here's temperature, here's temperature, here's temperature, here's GPS. And because typically you're not going to fire up your GPS or you're going to keep that sleeping, you know, as much as possible, unless you're moving. And then you obviously want to update that. And so what we can do, what we've also done, we have a new repo on GitHub that has a collection of decoders. And this is something that we'd like to enlist the help of the developer community. So if you have a decoder that you've written, or you have some you know, weird kind of sensor that you've gotten your hands on, and you have a decoder that works for it, then we'd love to put that into the repo and, you know, make that available to other developers. So, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel, you know, time and time again. So if you go to the Helium GitHub, and let's see if I can scoot this guy out of the way. My Zoom controls are kind of getting in the way here. But if you go to the Helium GitHub, it's under, there we go. No, that's not it. Hold on. Anyway, the repo, I'll put that in the chat here momentarily. What that allows you to do is just copy the decoder out of the repo, paste it into the Helium console, and then you can see the, there we go. Okay, got that out of the way, sorry. Okay, and paste that into our inner custom script window here. And then what that allows us to do is enter payloads and test those against the custom script, right? And then get the parsed payload output, which is parsed by fields, right? And so rather than just getting a string that's rather meaningless to you as a developer, it breaks it down and it says, okay, here's your temperature, here's your humidity, here's your, you know, your geo coordinates. And, you know, I can see that rather than having to, you know, go through and, you know, kind of a back-end process of parsing this all out. So let's look at an example here. We go to devices, and I know several of you on the call have played around with the Oyster devices by Digital Matter. And these are two devices we have here. And if you notice, we have two labels on them. And we have the Oyster decoder label. And what this does, let's pull this up on, well, hold on, let me pull the other guy up. Okay, so we have the Oyster decoder label attached to this. We pull up our debug tab over here, and we should be able to see data coming through. But the Oyster decoder being attached to this device means that I go to my functions and I say, okay, let's see what this guy is. Oyster decoder. Now, which is a type custom, right? Meaning I enter the script myself. And if I scroll down to the bottom of this screen, this is where my labels are attached to it, right? Now, Dal was talking earlier about integrations. And so we have our AWS integrations. And here, I actually have two AWS integrations. I have my AWS IoT and an AWS Oyster, which has attached to it the Oyster decoder label. And so that's going to tie that decoder label to that naked device, naked meaning it doesn't have an enclosure on it, to the AWS Oyster integration. And if we take a look at this, I mean, this is how I tie in to my AWS IoT core, right? And so the beauty of the system, and it's so slick, the power behind this label now, Oyster Decoder, that means that if I go to devices and I just onboard, some new Oyster device, right? Let's call this Oyster 001, right? I onboard this guy. I add the label, or I attach the, let me open this up. I attach the label to this device, and everything, all the power I put behind that label is instantly applied here. And so that means that not only can I jump over to my AWS IoT and see, immediately the MQTT payloads coming through to my AWS IoT core from that new device, but any rule-based activities that I've tied to this. So say, okay, for example, if we want to save down to DynamoDB, and I say, okay, I want to parse this out, and I want to split it up and put it into a NoSQL table. Well, all I have to do in order to get this new device doing this is put that label on it. It's incredibly powerful. And there's a number of predefined type rules that we can do. I mean, if we want to create a new guy, and this is just AWS, of course, but we have our queries, and then we add an action on this, and these are just the straight up simplest things to do in the world. Actions we can apply and bind that label. And so, I mean, if we want to throw this into an S3 bucket, if we want to, operate on this, if we want to send this as an SMS, to a cell phone, any AWS service, you can really integrate into a label now, and especially this one right here, a Lambda function, right? And the beauty of this is it allows you to effectively bind a label to a serverless activity on AWS, meaning I don't have to maintain an EC2 instance. I don't have to, pay, day in, day out for a server. I just pay on use. And so as this is being called from that label, from a device, it calls this Lambda and then can call anything else on, throughout AWS. Sorry, I'm just kind of tickled pink about this whole thing. And I hope everyone is understanding the power that this really does give to the developer. And it's something that once you do initial setup, you can apply this very, very rapidly. And when used in conjunction with, like what Dal was saying, for rapid prototyping with with Cayenne, I mean, you can bang out IoT proof of concepts in very, very short order.
So Travis showed some of the custom script information that you can use with labels. He also briefly talked about some of the built-in or native encoders. So we've got a couple here. So all I've done is I've created I'm using the built-in Cayenne LPP, and I've attached a Cayenne decoder label to it. And so I can go to my device, and this is that debug mode that we were talking about. So even though I have a integration label attached to this, I wouldn't need it to access this data and see the decoded payloads. And so what I've got is a discovery board, and the discovery board has a shield that is also it is also sensing a number of other environmental measurements, like temperature, humidity, etc. I'm sorry, there seems to be a bit of noise on the line. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself, appreciate it. So you need to make sure that whatever device you're using with debug is sending data, or else it's just going to continue to quote unquote wait for data. So here's the packets, and if I scroll down, what I can see is the decoded payload. So there's temperature, there's humidity, there's an accelerometer, and this is just showing, we apply this decoder. It's a native one to this device, and we're able to see these decoded packets.
That we had. But if you look on the right side over here, if you can see my screen, this is going to be the output of what we're getting and running through our Oyster decoders, right? And if you look in body right here, and you notice it's escaped a little funny right now, but this is actually broken out where you get all of the fields under the decoded right here. Let me kind of start slowly maybe scrolling over here. So you can see the payload, but now we have the battery voltage. We have fixed payload. We have our heading, in trip, then we have our lat and longe, which we can then feed directly with the rules I was showing earlier, directly into like a DynamoDB table. And then if we want to do a mapping, project off of that, if we want to, like any of this data, we can split using that parsing DynamoDB rule based off of our decoded body right there that we got that's going through our Oyster decoder. So that's kind of the ta-da on the end of this, but it really is incredibly powerful. And once you start kind of playing around with that and seeing how it allows you to have access to all of this data in an end-to-end encrypted manner, in your back end where you can actually start writing applications against it. It's very, very cool stuff. And I'm not trying to waste time here. I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Dal. If you have any questions, please, don't hesitate to hit us up on Slack. We love talking about this stuff.
So we're also making a switch to subband 2. We're currently on subband 7. We made the decision to go to subband 2. It seems to be more popular, and so we're just doing what we can to reduce the friction of anyone getting on this network and starting to use it. So we're going to be pushing out these upgrades along with improved authentication. So that's going to be Tuesday, May the 12th at 8 a.m. So we've got a maintenance window from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific time. We shouldn't have to use the entire hour, but that's what we're reserving. Some quick marketing updates. We covered these marketing updates so Emily doesn't beat me up. So there is a Mother's Day promotion. So from now until I believe the end of day Monday, so one day after Mother's Day actually, if you order a hotspot, not only will you get a discount, but you also get IOU cookies. So in order to take advantage of this, you need to use a promo code IOUMOM at the hotspot, like during hotspot checkout. We are also hosting a contest. So we're partnering with ARM, Semtech, ST, and look, we believe that IoT is one of those forces that can really permanently and positively shape our society. And so what we're doing is we're holding a contest. There's a lot of cash and prizes to be won, but really it's about you showing off your skills and leveraging this network to build the application that you think will really make a positive impact to today's society. There's enough issues going on. So if you do want to participate, go to hackster.io/contest/IoT for good. And then finally, if you want to get involved, the best place to go is developer.helium.com. And just some of the type of things that we have going on, including we have a Helium Hacks happy hour every Wednesday. So ongoing live discussions of your peers sharing their work, talking about cool projects. As Travis said, we do have a Slack channel, so a lot of real-time conversations and updates get sent there. And if you don't like Slack, or you don't have Slack, you don't want to sign up for Slack, but you do want to stay informed, probably the best way is to sign up for the dev mailing list. So we have a specific mailing list set up for developers that are focused on dev type content. And with that, what we can do now is open it up for QA. So I haven't had a chance to look in chat to see if there was any questions, but maybe actually I can stop sharing this. So feel free to either ask questions, or now would be the time to unmute, and if you wanted to ask questions the old-fashioned way. Okay, there's a question about how sub-entry makes it easier to join the network. If you're coming from scratch, or just starting building, it's you really won't experience a difference. It's just a different subband. But what we've discovered is a number of developers or hardware manufacturers that by default use subband 2. That will make it easier for them to join the network, and the device won't have to try to stop and then rejoin and pull for other subbands. So is there a limit to what functions can do? How long can they run, etc.? Is there a limit to what functions can do? Well, I mean, I think the limit is the script that you, like, I assume you mean custom scripts. And I think the limit is what scripts that you are entering. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but how long can they run? So it's a good question. We've included a pause feature, certain pause features, so you can control when that function is running, rather than having to either pull out the label or and then attach the label back on. So so one of our talented engineers is saying they can run for 500 milliseconds for max execution time. Thank you, Pierre. All right. Thanks again for participating. Really hope that you guys take advantage of, if you haven't joined the contest. Well, first of all, hopefully everybody signed up for console. There's no reason not to do it. Get in there, poke around. We're going to be making a number of updates, as you saw, in the not so distant future. In addition to that, if you do want to participate in the network and help build coverage, now until Monday is a good chance to take advantage of the promo that's going on. And then in addition to that, if you want to show off your skills and show your brilliance to your peers, please participate in the contest, and build something that will do some good. So thanks again. Travis, did you want to say anything before we sign off and let these folks go?
I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up. I appreciate your time. And if you have any question, hit us up. We're very excited to have more developers using this new functionality. So we'll be around, and hopefully see you next week.
Thanks all.